Alright people, we're back. New week, a new episode, and we're continuing on the refuge today. Last time was a very weird episode because we changed everything up after I was done recording. So yeah, it was a weird episode, but what we did, we got our first official rules for the game, where I told how dice works and how countdown dice works. And after that, we talked a little bit about this tension mechanic that I want to introduce into the game, where the refuge, the place where the players will be staying, it will have a tension that will sort of build up and be a distraction for the players on the adventure. They are not supposed to focus their whole attention on the adventure itself, and the tension mechanic will draw the focus of the players over to the refuge. And so the players will have to decide every session, basically, whether they want to prioritize moving forward on their adventure or maintaining the refuge. I'm not gonna make it that hard of a choice, but I do want the players to care about the refuge and the refugees. And we start off today with some new rules. I figured out something in between the 2 weeks here, and so I'm just gonna put it down here for you to all to see. So I wrote this yesterday, and these are some rules for the tension mechanic. I'm not quite sure if this is the correct way of doing things, and I will have to playtest it or just try it out. But this was my first thought, so I'm just putting it down and we'll go with it for now. So it's very simple. The refuge has a tension and a tension die. The tension die is the countdown die, as we have here, and the tension is its target value. At the start of the game, the refuge starts with a tension of 3 and a tension die of a d6, which is actually pretty bad, but that gives you room to improve and really forces the players to focus a lot on the refuge and the inhabitants here and helping them in the start of the game. Actually, come to think of it, I do have a plan for why this is, but I'll take that in a different episode. Anyways, at the beginning of every day, the tension is increased by 1. During the day, the player characters can lower the tension by gathering resources, helping civilians, or bonding. Now, these are just terms by now, and I'm not even sure if I want them to be explicit rules, but that they're more guidelines that the players and the GM can focus on. So bonding with civilians or the refugees, bonding with them, talking to them and making them comfortable, helping around in the place and so on. That's what I mean. It's not a specific action that you have to take, so you go there to this civilian and you do a bonding action for 4 hours or something. I don't want that. That's too mechanical. So these might be just guidelines that I'll try to do later. Gathering resources would be to either gather resources from the surrounding area, like gathering wood, gathering food or something, or it could be taking things from the castle itself and bringing it back. So instead of taking armor and weapons and other gear that would help and benefit the players, they would take supplies that would benefit the refuge. Which again means that I can diversify the treasure that will be scattered around, so that not only do they need treasure for themselves to improve, but they will also have resources for the refuge that could also be treasure for the players. Helping civilians, that is basically side quests. I'm not sure if I want it to be some specific thing, but at least for now I'll just say it's side quests. If a major event occurs, the tension die is rolled. Nothing happens on a success, but on a failed roll a disastrous outcome occurs and the tension is reduced to 0. If the tension ever becomes equal to or higher than the maximum number of on the tension die, it automatically counts as a failed roll. Okay, first of all, needs to be a gap here. I forgot this space. Okay. A major event, which will be something like this. When something like this occurs, a major event, if nothing happens on a success, that means that you roll the die, nothing happens, you just continue on. So if, for instance, a major event happens on day 1, they roll against a 3. If they roll a 4 or more, nothing happens and it just continues on. But if they fail the roll, it's a disastrous outcome. The tension is reduced to 0, but also a disastrous outcome would be something like they lose their progress, their physician dies, or some guardsmen rebel against you and don't want to participate anymore, or the blacksmith workstation burns up and so you can't repair your tools, something. That's a disastrous outcome. I haven't outlined any of this, and as you might have noticed by now, I usually just put out ideas in terms and then figure out the terms later. That's just how I do things. But yeah, and actually I want to add another major event. So PC death. So whenever a player character dies, that's another tension happening here. Now, moving along, I want to continue on with something else but still related to the refuge. And those are the companions that I spoke of here in the mechanics overview. Companions. Now, companions, I want them to be sort of an addition to the players. So the idea is, in the refuge here, there's a lot of people. And it would be very weird to have a lot of people in this camp and only the players being able to walk into the castle and going out. The first thing the players would do would just ask other people if they wanted to join, and it would be a lot easier to have 20 people walking into the castle than 4. So I see that the players really need to have a mechanic to get people from the refuge and interacting with them when it comes to the castle. And that is why I want companions. Wow, this page got weird. All right. So, companions. The first thing I think of is that these are NPCs that are passive. Actually, I'll say something else. They're reactive. And they're a resource for the players. So I want companions to be NPCs that the players can go up, for instance, to the doctor and ask, "Hey doctor, would you join us on this next adventure that we're going on in the castle, because we think we would need some medical assistance." And then the NPC, who is the doctor, will do that. Now, that's why I also say that they want them to be reactive, because I don't want the NPCs to take over. And so the doctor asks if, "Hey, do you need some help on your next adventure, because you might need a doctor." But it's rather that they react to the players when they come and ask. Now, let's think something else. Let's say I want them to be weak NPCs. I don't want them to have stats. I don't want them to have weapons. I don't want them to have anything that is unnecessary. These are not playable characters. These are explicitly non-playable. They're not even playable by the GM. Actually, we're going to say they are not GMPCs. These are not playable characters, and the GM cannot use them to further some agenda of some sort. They're not playable at all. They do have a role-playing flair, they will have personalities, they will have quirks and so on, but they won't have weapons, they won't have skills or skill rolls, they won't have any of this. And I've been thinking about this for some time, and I think that the idea is, okay, let's just say some stats. I'll set a question mark here because this is just a very rough draft, but I think passive ability and an active ability. And that's really the stats I need, where I think the passive ability is, so the passive ability is the one that they will use in the refuge, and the active ability is the one that they will use in an adventure. So I'm imagining that when it comes to this gameplay loop, where the players will either do the base building or the exploration part here, when the players go out exploring, they have two choices when it comes to the companions. So a companion can either stay behind and do their passive ability, do something passive, or they can come along on the adventure and do an active ability. That is the idea here. So the players can control where they want the NPC to be, their companion. Now, for types, I actually want types because I don't want I'm not quite certain yet how I want to do this. I really want there to be so that all the companions are their own thing, that they're all unique. But again, it's very hard to maybe create a roster of, say, 10 or 50 different companions, each who have different passive and active abilities, and maybe the players will get to know 10 of them. I don't know. But I have to find out a smart way to allocate abilities to different NPCs. And I'll get there eventually, I guess. But some major subcategory types that I want to establish are so some major types that or subcategories of types that I want to have in here would be a medic. And I'm thinking then a medic would have an active ability that maybe once or twice or 3 times during the adventure they can do some healing, maybe increase the countdown die of the health or something. So increase the health die, maybe something around that. And then as a passive ability, they might give you a bonus to this here, getting a buff, for instance, in healing. So when you get back to camp and do the healing roll or something like that, then the medic will give you a bonus on that. Next you have the Bodyguard, where I want to have like an active ability to maybe just tank or do some damage, maybe, so that you can just have more people in combat that can just deal more damage and take more hits. They won't be a very active participant in the combat, but they will be basically just damage dealing and damage soaking individuals. And as a passive ability, I'm thinking they can be bodyguards and stay watch around the camp, and maybe then they could reduce the tension, maybe, or not increase the tension, or maybe delay a major event or something. I'm thinking something around the tension mechanic here, that they can influence that in some way. Then you have the scouts, which I'm thinking will be able to spot different things within the castle itself. They can go out and search and do some recon, maybe to figure out if there's something to investigate. And maybe as a passive ability they can also recon, but then in the surrounding environment, see if there's some potential negative major events going on, so that they can be like the eyes and ears of the party when they're not there. Something like that, maybe. The torchbearer, I actually want to be the guy that holds the torches for you, and because I want to have some sort of light mechanic maybe in there. But that's the idea of the torchbearer, he holds the torches for you. And now when I say he holds the torches, it also means that you can gather more supply. and you can have more supply with you. As previously we had like as I said, we have this supply mechanic, which is a countdown die. Now the torchbearer might be able to just increase the supply X amount of times, like the medic would do with a healing roll. And I think that's what the torchbearer might do. And then back at the refuge with the passive ability, I'm thinking something along the same line as the medic, that when you do the supply roll or resupply roll during your rest at the refuge, you get a bonus. I'm not quite sure how these resupply and healing mechanics will work yet, but that's something along that line. And then we have the researcher, who will either come along with you and help you with intelligence rolls or some puzzles or lore or something that has to do with I would say metagaming, basically. So the researcher is basically a walking encyclopedia and a way for the GM to tell the players how different things work. So it could be useful information, or it could just be very interesting information. And now the researcher, I think the passive ability will be that if the players come to the researcher and say, hey, we found this book inside the castle, please could you research this and see what this means? And the researchers can do that, and the GM can then say, yes, this is a book that is very interesting because it tells you about a hidden path within the castle or something. And the researcher will then be able to help the players navigate through the world more easily. And so these are maybe the 4-5 pillars that I want the players to interact with, and I really want each of these to be individualized, and so that I could have like 50 different NPCs that are just very quirky, very fun. Some of them might be very unstable and unreliable, but that have really good active and passive abilities, and some of them that are very reliable but who are just have very plain passive and active abilities, and some that have very good passive abilities and very bad active abilities, and so on, and sort of play around with this idea here. But I'll do that in a different episode, and I really need help from you guys with this one because I'm very stuck at this. So please leave a comment, leave a like, and try to brainstorm with me, try to figure out some ideas with this one. I'm currently very stuck, and probably next episode we will do something completely different, which is something I usually also do. And but I'll leave it here. Please leave a like, please leave a comment, subscribe, and see you around later. And yeah, share this with your GM. He'll probably like it. See ya.